Star Trek Into Darkness came out today instead of Friday. That's weird. I'm used to movies coming out on Friday, so if any movie comes out like any other day than Friday, it's just weird to me. But Star Trek Into Darkness came out today, and what man would I be, and where would I be if I didn't go ahead and review the last movie in the new rebooted Star Trek franchise, which is Star Trek, just simply Star Trek. So without further ado, here's my review of Star Trek. So, before I actually get into the movie, overall, I really do like this movie, and I think it's a solid action movie. I think it's pretty solid. The cast is really great. The story's, pretty good. The effects are amazing. J.J. Abrams is pretty damn good when it comes towards, CGI and these visual awesome effects. It means a lot coming from me that I'm saying that this Star Trek movie is good because I'm not a Star Trek fan, and I really want to stress that. I'm reviewing this movie based on me being a movie fan. I'm not reviewing this movie based on it being a Star Trek movie. I'm reviewing this movie based on, it being a movie. I'm not a Star Trek fan. I never really was. It just never really interested me. I always thought it was boring, and I always thought it was like... So it was sort of like Star Wars. Like, Star Wars was for... It could be for adults, but, kids usually watched it and stuff like that, and it was really kids who, loved the hell out of it. Star Trek, for me, seemed like it was more for, adults. Like, adults who are more into, politics and stuff like that. It was basically like space politics, the series, or the movie, or the animated series, or whatever. I never really liked Star Trek. It always seemed basically like space politics. And what kid wants to watch space politics? It was like, it always used to intrigue you, like, oh, sweet, they're in space, and it's going to be kind of like Star Wars, and then it was like, oh, let's talk about politics. It's like, that's boring. Who wants to watch that? Doesn't mean I hate the show. I don't. I'm not at all disrespecting any fans who do. I just never really was all that interested, and maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe I'm just too stubborn to sit through it all. I don't know, but I just never really was a big Star Trek fan, so it does mean a lot, and it does, say a lot coming from me that Star Trek is... from 2009 is a really good movie. It's a pretty solid action movie, and that is kind of the reason why a lot of people tend to dismiss the movie and tend to hate the movie, because it pretty much, their claim why they hate the movie is because it basically just turned Star Trek into an action franchise and an action genre, when before it wasn't. It was more focused on politics and science fiction aspects and stuff like that, which I'd be kind of pissed off, too, about that. I can't really say that is true or that isn't true, because, again, I haven't seen a whole lot of the original series or the movies or what have you. So I really can't say if it went from space politics and all that stuff to just action, and it kind of dumbed it down. I would be pissed off if they did that to some franchise that I loved, but, I can't really say if that's true or not here. But, if that is true, then what I can probably say to that is, it didn't really dumb it down. It just made it a lot more easier for people to, enjoy Star Trek and to kind of understand why people like Star Trek. Like, it made it more easier for them to introduce them to this, whole new, universe and all these characters and basically what they do. That's personally what I think, in my opinion. I didn't really think that... I don't think that they dumbed the movie down. I think they just kind of... they kind of dumbed it down, but they also made it a little bit more easier for people to get introduced to these characters. And basically, here's what they do. These are your characters. Here's what they do. This is the whole universe. Okay, watch this. And that's personally just what I think. And the action, for the most part, is really, really good. And for people, Star Trek fans especially, that hate this movie, they at least have to admit that this movie brought back, Star Trek, and it kind of made it more relevant, and basically resurrected the franchise, and basically made it more relevant. They at least have to admit that. And if they're not grateful for that, then, in my opinion, you're just not that big of a fan of Star Trek then. But overall, the movie is really solid, and honestly, amazing. Like, the effects... Oh my god, the effects are great. And speaking of some of the effects in the movie is directed by J.J. Abrams, and if you pretty much have noticed, J.J. Abrams, movies mostly pretty much tend to have the lens flares or whatever, like... No, they have these, the lens flares and stuff like that. You can barely see what's going on. And while that could be really annoying in most movies, I personally liked it in this movie, and I'll probably like it in Star Trek Into Darkness if he does it, because it kind of adds to the whole futuristic aspect, like everything's shiny and polished and clean and stuff like that. I personally like the lens flares in this movie, but if it's in another movie that takes place like in today's times, I honestly don't like it because it looks weird. But here, it kind of made sense why it was in the movie. Like, oh, everything's so shiny and futuristic. That's kind of why it fit here, and it looked really nice. It made everything look so like awesome and polished and clean and stuff like that. And I just personally like the lens flares in this movie. It made everything look a lot more cooler. But the effects, like I said, are amazing. The Enterprise looks beautiful and amazing as it always is. Same thing with other stuff, and everything special effects wise again is solid and it looks pretty good. There's really nothing else to go into there. But we should probably get into the cast, which, first off, is Chris Pine as Captain Kirk in this, the main character of the movie. And for the most part, he does a good job. I don't know if he played the character Captain Kirk perfectly, or if he messed up on a few things. Again, I don't know anything about Star Trek, really. I just know what I know from this movie and from what people have told me. But for the most part, he did really, really good for what he was given and what he gave in the movie. Again, he's another one of those characters where he's kind of an asshole, but that's the reason why we love him. He's an asshole, and that's the reason why we love him, and he's awesome. And, he overall is really cool and sort of relatable in a way, and I really do like that. But my personal favorite character in this movie was Spock, played by Zachary Quinto. And I would probably just look for anything with Zachary Quinto in it just based on this movie, because he gives an amazing performance in this movie. I bet Leonard Nimoy is so happy that this guy's playing him, because, playing this character, because he does a great job in this movie. The reason why he's my favorite character, personally, instead of Kirk, is because he kind of has this inner struggle in him, and mostly because he's a Vulcan, and that's like an alien race where they don't really rely on emotions. They're completely emotionless, and they rely more on logic than they do emotion, and rely on emotion instead of their bare instincts. And not Spock, because he is half human, half Vulcan, so he kind of has this inner, struggle between, should I go with what my human emotions say, or should I go with what I was born to basically do? And that's really interesting, and it kind of gets him in some problems. It kind of does, move the plot along a little bit. Like he is captain, the original captain, he goes off and is kidnapped. He becomes a captain, and then Kirk and him fight because Spock gets pissed off and because of his human emotions, and then Kirk becomes captain and moves the plot along, and I really did like that. And speaking of Kirk and Spock, I love their relationship in this movie. It was really awesome seeing them grow as friends throughout the movie, especially because, we know that they become, best friends, later in the franchise. I really like them just, bitching at each other and just getting really pissed off at each other. That was really awesome. And they are just complete polar opposites. Like, one wants things to be done, in a certain way, and one wants them to be done in a different way. I love that. I love when, opposites attract. That is just awesome, in my opinion. That was great. We also have Carl Urban as Bones, and I forgot the actual character's real name, McCoy. Yeah, McCoy, that's it. Bones, and he's an awesome actor in this movie. This movie kind of made me a fan of his movies, even though I haven't seen pretty much any of his movies. But I want to see more of his movies just because of his performance in here. He's awesome in this movie, and he kind of does look a little bit like DeForest Kelley from the original series. He is pretty good. And none of the actors in this movie try to pull off, none of it felt like they were just reciting, famous lines from the original show. It actually felt like they were playing characters instead of playing impressions of characters. It felt like they were playing characters and not just doing cheap impressions. I really did like that a lot. And not only is the actual, cast really good, but the overall supporting cast is great. Simon Pegg plays Scotty. That was a great casting choice there. Who else? John Chu as, I think John Chu. Yeah. He plays, Sulu, also great. Zoe Saldana as, Ahura. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on some of these names because I don't really remember much of them. Again, great. And they actually have her and Spock, become, mushy boyfriend, girlfriend in the movie. And I know that wasn't in the original show, but it kind of gave her a little bit more point to be there instead of just, being in the background doing whatever. I did like that. I didn't really mind that all that much, even though fans, going up fucking frenzy whenever that happens, But it kind of, in my opinion, it kind of gave her more of a point to be there. And also Bruce Greenwood as Captain Pike. Bruce Greenwood's awesome, and mostly because he played Batman in Batman Under the Hood and in Young Justice. Oh yeah, by the way, did I mention that Peter Weller is going to be in Star Trek Into Darkness? You know who Peter Weller is? Not only is he the guy who played RoboCop in I think at least one of the RoboCop movies. I'm not sure about the other two. But he also played Batman in The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2, the anime movies. That's awesome. And that's badass. And now we're getting 2 Batman in a Star Trek movie. That's awesome. I really wish he did that a lot more in movies. He's awesome in this movie. I'm not sure, again, if they did the character right from the show, because I hadn't watched the show. But he does do a pretty good job in this movie. They kind of have a little Easter egg, little throwback to the original show at the end where he's sitting in the wheelchair. That was kind of cool. That's at least something I remember from the original show. That's pretty cool. And South Park did it. That's pretty cool. I think that's really about it. Well, no. There really wasn't much that I hated in this movie. One minor little nitpick I had was the villain, Nero, who's played by Eric Bana. He overall did a pretty good job in this, and his motivations are pretty solid. They're a little bit generic in a way. Like, it's, oh, you promised that you would save, my planet. Now my family's dead, and now my whole planet's dead, so I'm going to come back after you and get my revenge. It was just a revenge plot. I was okay, I guess. The motivation was simple, and I'm glad that, you can understand it immediately. Guy was promised something, he didn't get it, he wants revenge. His family's dead, he wants revenge because someone said he would save him. Motivation is pretty clear, and I do like that, and I'm glad it was clear, but there wasn't really anything all that memorable. That's kind of seems like the general census of this movie. Everything else is great, the villain's not all that memorable, but it's not that big of a deal. I'm not going to take the movie down a little bit for that, because his motivations were still really good, and he still was threatening. Like, if you knew you fucked with this guy, you'd be dead. He was really threatening in the movie. It's not really all that memorable, or cool, or, whatever, but he was threatening, and Eric Bana did do a pretty good job in the movie, in my opinion. And some say that, it didn't have, science fiction or whatever. Didn't have enough science fiction, and it just focused way too much on action. I personally thought it had enough science fiction and enough action, personally. That's just what I thought. Like, stuff with, black holes, alternate timelines and, stuff like that, and, red matter, and again, black holes, and, and supernovas. I thought it had a good blend of action and sci-fi. To anyone that, said that, oh, there's not enough sci-fi, I thought there was plenty of sci-fi stuff and technical stuff in it. I thought that was perfectly fine. And speaking of, alternate timelines and stuff, I guess we should get to probably the biggest thing in the movie, which is Leonard Nimoy as Spock Prime in the movie. They just really love giving Leonard Nimoy a bunch of, like, Transformers stuff, don't they? I mean, he was Galvatron in the old Transformers movie. Then he was in the Transformers 3. And then you give him the last name Prime in this movie. It's pretty cool. And this is probably the best way that you should do a cameo in a movie. Especially if it's a cameo of an actor who played a character in something else that you're adapting. I guess that should be, I don't know. But this is probably one of the best cameos, personally, in my opinion, because the cameo isn't just like a walk by, oh, hey, I'm here because I played this character before. I'm walking by, I see ya, and that's really about it. He actually does have a point to be in the plot, and he's a big part of the plot, and that's probably how most cameos should probably be handled, and he personally was probably one of the best parts in the movie. And it was a nice little passing of the torch with, him giving his, it was a nice little passing of the torch from Leonard Nimoy now to Zachary Quinto. I really did like that. I thought that was, nice. And again, the cameo wasn't just, oh, walk by, oh, I'm here because I have something to do with what this is adapting, so see you later. It has a point to be here. It's actually a good point to the plot, and it kind of confirms that this isn't technically a reboot. It's, pretty much, it's the earlier events of like what will happen in the TV show and all the other movies. But you know that Spock basically just came back in time, and because of a bunch of other shit happening, it kind of confirms that this is still set in the Star Trek universe. So technically, it's not a reboot, but it is at the same time like alternate timeline something. But at the same time, it's not a reboot, and I really did like that. Again, this cameo actually had a point to be in the movie to explain that this isn't technically a reboot, and also because he had a big giant, he was a big plot point in the movie. So I really did like that, and that's probably the way that most cameos in movies should be handled if they really want to have this, person come back and do a little cameo. But some cameos that didn't make sense were like Tyler Perry as like the head of the Federation. What does Tyler Perry have to do with Star Trek? Nothing, because Tyler Perry has nothing to do with Star Trek. What are you doing there, Tyler Perry? Doesn't make any sense. Go back to doing those Medea movies. Or in second thought, stop doing those Medea movies because they're stupid and not funny. Then you had Winona Ryder as Spock's mom, which didn't overall bother me, but it's kind of weird. Just a little minor nitpick, but overall, there really wasn't anything wrong with the movie. They pretty much got everything right, and this movie. I didn't have really any problem with it at all, so I think I'll give it a 10 out of 10. I know that's a really high up, but I don't give a whole lot of movies 10 out of 10s. I give them good ratings, but I never really give a whole lot of movies 10 out of 10s. But going back and thinking about this, there was nothing wrong with this movie that I thought of. Nothing major, nothing horrible in this movie. I overall thought it was a solid action movie. I thought that, the acting was great, the effects were amazing. Everything overall was really good. I thought everything was handled really well. It was a nice way to, introduce non-Star Trek fans to the Star Trek universe. That's the biggest compliment that I can give it. So overall, yeah, I think a 10 out of 10 does kind of fit this movie. And if you're a Star Trek fan, then you will probably enjoy this. But if you're not a Star Trek fan, you will sure as hell enjoy this. And you will not only be seeing a good movie, but you'll be kind of getting like a little education on a franchise that you probably didn't know of before. And you could probably become a fan from this movie. So those are overall my thoughts on Star Trek from 2009. Sometime down the line, I will be seeing Star Trek Into Darkness. I will be giving you guys my first impressions of that. What I can say about that movie so far, well, Benedict Cumberbatch is going to kick everybody's ass in that movie. And let's hope that he is playing Khan! So with that said, I'm 123 Movies Roll, and I'll be back with my review of Star Trek Into Darkness sometime soon. So with that said, see ya.